Okay, so we're going to work with a shape that we're going to cut into a solid color of matte vinyl, or we might use metallic vinyl, but the cut settings are going to be the same for either one. So I will go to my library and I'm going to find my shape. It's here. Double click on it. Okay, and it's brought it into my workspace. Just by looking at it, it's a little hard to see the way that they're imported with just the red lines, so I do like to color them so that they're a little bit easier to see. To do that, when I click on this and I go up and I choose a color, it's going to color the entire thing the same color because all of the pieces are grouped together. So I am going to ungroup it. The way you do that is you can click or right click on your shape and choose ungroup. At that point, I don't know how well you can see it, there are some very faint lines here. There is a gray box around the bottom part, and then there's a gray box around the top part. If I click off of my shape and then click on it again, it will show you the different parts. So that is one part that is grouped together, and that is a separate part. So these are even further grouped. So if I right click and ungroup, now you can probably see better all the individual boxes around everything that makes up this bottom part. So now if I click on one of these, it will show it, it will select it separately. Okay. I do want all of these bottom pieces grouped together because I'm not going to work with the individual pieces. So I will select them, and the way you select is to hold down your left mouse key while you drag up to the point you want to select and then let off the mouse key. Then I will right click and choose group. So now these are all one group, one object again that has been grouped together. I do want it the color that it is, but it does still have red lines around it if you can see those, and I do change my colors of my lines to match. Now I want to color the top of it green, so I come back up here and I choose the fill color to be green. And then I can change the line color as well to be green. Now, to regroup the top and the bottom, again, since we are cutting it all out of the same color, I can select it by drawing the box around it, holding down the mouse key and drawing a box, or I can hold down the Control key and press the A button. That's for Control A, select all. That will select everything that's in my workspace. I can right click and group it together. Now, the area that we have to work with to put this shape into is a total of 8.5 by 5.5. I don't necessarily need my shape to be proportioned to that size. I just don't want it to be any taller than 8.5 or any wider than 5.5. So there are measurements here on the side and on the bottom that tell you how big this outer selection box is. Depending on the designer, there can be a whole lot more space between your shape and this outer box, or it can be a little bit tighter. This is about as tight as you'll see it, but my point here is, do you see the space between the tip of the pineapple leaves here on top and this box? That's about, looks to be almost 1/4 of an inch. And because of that, and I'm judging that on my grid marks here on my workspace, and on the bottom, same thing. So actually my shape is about 1/2 an inch smaller than these measurements here on the side say. But I don't want to have to look at that and guess every time, okay, this is 1/2 an inch space here and here, so I don't want to have to calculate, okay, how big is my shape really? So an easy way around that is to come over to your drawing tools, left click, and I choose the rectangle tool. And with that, I'm going to draw, so you hold down the left mouse key and drag, and I'm going to draw a shape. So this is a rectangle, but I'm not going to size it exactly how I want it now because I want to show you how to change the sizes. If you're drawing a rectangle and you hold down the Shift key, it makes it a perfect square. If I wanted a square, I would let off of my left mouse key while I'm holding down the Shift key. I don't want a perfect square, I want it to be a rectangle, so I'm not going to hold down the Shift key. And I'm going to let off. Same thing with shapes. If you're drawing a circle or an ellipse, so I can draw it and it's going to make it whatever way I move my mouse. It's going to kind of make it, you know, in that shape, whether it's oblong or whether it is a circle. But if I hold down the Shift key, it does make it a perfect circle. So just to kind of show you, I let off the Shift key before I let off the mouse key, so that's why it went back to being an oval shape. So I don't want that shape, I just want to show you how that works. So now I'm going to click back on my shape here, and it is a little bit hard to see, and I'm going to show you how to fix that. So this measurement right here, I want it to be 8.5. So I'm going to move that up until it's close to 8.5 inches tall. The side, I want it to be 5.5 inches. So I'm going to scoot this out to be 5.5 inches. So if you'll notice, when I do these side boxes, it only does that particular side. It doesn't resize it proportionally. So I'm going to show you how to do that with the pineapple when we get to that part. Okay, so now I've got it the size I want it, but I want to make this a little bit more visible because I'm going to move the pineapple into this shape and resize it. In order to resize, I want to select, make sure that the box is selected. And the way you do that, if it is hollow on the inside and it is not filled with any color, then you would have to, you can't just click on the inside of the box to select it. You do need to click on the red line. I will come over to my line style panel and left click on that one time. This will let you change the color if you want to change the color. It will let me change the type of line, so I can have a dotted line if I want instead of a solid line, but I'm going to leave it as is. And you can change the thickness. I'm going to change the thickness by sliding over this arrow here, or you can do it using the up and down arrows. You can also type in the size of line thickness you want and it will adjust it that way. So I've got that the size that I want it. I made the lines a little thicker so I could see them. Now I'm going to take my pineapple and I'm going to move it into the box, and I'm going to line it up here on the top and on the left side. Now I'm going to select the pineapple and I'm going to come down here to the corner. If you move the corners, that's going to size your object proportionally. If I were to grab this bottom part and move it up to make it fit, it's going to squish it and it's not going to look right. The way to undo something that you've done, what I just did was I hit hold on the control key and then hit the Z key. So Control Z will undo. You can also undo here. If I said no, I really wanted my pineapple to look like that, I could hit the redo key and that would do again what I had just undone. So, but I don't want it that way. You can also choose edit undo. Now I want it sized proportionally so it will look right. So I'm going to grab one of the corner boxes to move it, and I'm going to move it just until the entire pineapple fits inside. Okay, so it's in there the way I want it. You can use your arrows on your keyboard to move your shape around. It is not coming all the way over to this side because proportionally that wouldn't work. It would look terrible if I tried to bring it over here and make it look like that. It would look out of proportion. So the main thing I wanted was just that it does not extend above these boundaries. Now, whenever I cut it, it will cut this box shape around it. And I'm doing that because I want to just weed this part that is here and then have the rest of it stay, so I could stay on the carrier sheet so I can use it for another project. That way I'm not ripping off the entire amount of vinyl I have on my sheet. I only have to take away what's inside this box. So now I'm going to take the box and I'm going to move it over just to save a little bit more vinyl whenever I cut. Okay, now in order to send it to my machine, and I do always move things up close to the top and close to the side whenever I cut, just because if I had it all here out in the middle, then I would just be wasting all of this vinyl. So I do put it up here. And the way I moved both shapes at one time is I drew the selection box to pick up both of them, and then it will allow me to move it. So now that I come over here to the send panel, if you notice the dark red lines here, those are the cut lines. That's where it's actually going to cut. If for any reason I didn't want it to cut that outer box, I can just click on that outer box to select it and then choose no cut. See how those dark red lines went away? But I do want it to cut that outer box, so I'm going to click on that line and choose cut. Now, I am cutting vinyl, just plain vinyl, so I do want vinyl matte to be chosen, and that's what it is. You have a whole list of media here that you can choose from. So vinyl matte, I am cutting versus sketching, so I do want to choose cut, and it's on ratchet blade. I will be using a Cameo 3, so I will have the auto blade. If you have a machine, or even if you're using the Cameo 3 with a ratchet blade, you will need to manually adjust your cut settings before sending it to the machine to cut. So down here at the bottom it tells me what my cut settings are, and the blade should be a depth of 1. So you'll want to go ahead and change that on your ratchet blade to a depth of 1. Speed is 5. When cutting adhesive vinyl, it's not going to matter really what the speed is. You don't want to ramp it up all the way to 10. 5 is a really good speed for vinyl because it doesn't need to cut it super slow. A force of 8. Now when I first started using this, it had the force at 10, and that's the amount of pressure that it puts on the blade to cut through the vinyl, and 10 was just a little bit too much. It was cutting a little bit into the paper behind. With vinyl being so thin and the cut that we're doing is not a very delicate cut, I'm only going to have it do 1 pass and not do 2 passes. If I were cutting cardstock or something really thick, or if maybe my blade was starting to get older, I might do 2 passes, but I'm not going to do that. And cutting the line intersect we will talk about in another video, but we don't need to do it on this one just because we have a lot of rounded lines, and this is not something, and it's not a material that's going to be difficult to weed, so I'm not going to turn that on at this point. Now, I don't have a Silhouette device connected to my machine, but normally it will tell you which device is connected. So at that point, I'm going to choose send. If for any reason your machine or your workspace does not look correct, you can go back here to your page setup panel, open that, and on size, choose your machine. Mine says automatic Cameo because that's the last machine that was hooked up to it. And then you can manually adjust your width and height. Those should be 12 inches because that's the size of the workspace I wanted and the size of the vinyl that I have to work with. The cutting mat I'm using is a 12 by 12 mat. If you're using a different machine, for instance if you're using a portrait, it's a much more narrow machine, and you could choose an 8.5 by 12 or an 8 by 12 instead, but I am using the Cameo mat, so that is the size I want. And then you would just send it to your machine. You would load your mat into your machine we'll do the entire project on a video, but for now, I just want to show you how to work it in the software. Please let me know if you have any questions and look for other videos. Thank you.